Okay, welcome. We'd like to welcome everyone to our first ever virtual inter-club Kiwanis Club meeting. We'd especially like to welcome the members of the Indianapolis Kiwanis Club and we hope you enjoy our program today. We begin each of our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone could unmute their microphones and stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty
and justice for all.
Okay, now if everyone could remute their microphone so we can minimize feedback on that, that would be great. And now I want to welcome all of our guests, again, particularly those members from the Indianapolis Kiwanis Club. I know that Jay Brill, their president, is here because I saw him log on. Jay, would you like to say hello?
Yes, hi, this is Jay Brill, and I'm not the president. I'm a former president, which is probably the best job you ever could have.
No doubt.
Yes, and so we're taking a little bit of time off and watching basketball, and we're looking forward to hearing about the Masters from the Masters in Augusta, and we plan on having Doug Bowles, who's the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, in April for a program for you. And so maybe you might see some cars, you might see maybe some drivers. So be surprised at that meeting. Our actual president is Eric Steele. And if Eric's on the line, Eric, would you like to say more words?
Jay is our interclub chair. So he is focusing on international interclubs this year. So I won't take up any time. Thanks for letting us join today.
Okay, great. Well, thank you and welcome to everyone. I had invited some Georgia Kiwanis officers, but I don't see any of them here. But if you are here, welcome and thank you for joining us. Now what we're going to do is just provide a brief history of our club for our guests from Indianapolis. And our longtime member, Tom Robertson, is going to provide that brief history. And just to give you a little brief bio on Tom, he is the president of Cranston Engineering Corporation of Augusta, Georgia, Charleston, and Hilton Head, South Carolina. He has more than 40 years experience as a consultant for a wide variety of civil engineering, city planning, urban design, land surveying, and historic engineering products. He is an active speaker and writer and has presented numerous papers on engineering, city planning, and surveying, and has published many articles on local and regional history. So please join me in welcoming Tom to give our history. Tom?
Okay, thank you very much. I'll give you just a brief rundown on our history. The Kiwanis Club of Augusta celebrated its 100th birthday in 2020. Well, actually, we didn't. COVID-19 intervened, and we've been separated for a year now. The club does trace its roots back to 1918, when the local newspaper, the Augusta Chronicle, reported that 25 leading businessmen and professionals had been recruited for the organizations, and meetings would begin very soon. Well, soon was relative then, too. There was a war going on, and the Spanish flu pandemic was raging. So the first meetings were delayed until January of 1920, the same week that the Treaty of Versailles was signed, ending World War I. Incidentally, the next week came the headline news that Prohibition, the dream of years, is true at last. Well, presumably our club had nothing to do with that. The club was the 5th Kiwanis Club in Georgia, and only the club in Atlanta has a larger membership, both then and now. 71 Augusta business leaders formed the Kiwanis Club of Augusta as, quote, force for advancement and striving for betterment along all lines of the city and its interests. Chartered by Kiwanis International in February of 1920, the Augusta Club follows the international principles of fellowship, cooperation, and service expressed in the motto, "We Build." Local attorney George Barrett, the first president, presided over the weekly meetings held at St. Paul's Church Parish House, a site, incidentally, to which the club returned full circle for its meetings in 2015. His law partner, James M. Hull, had been the first president of the Augusta Rotary Club just a few years before. When I became a member myself in the mid-1970s, I did not know anything of the history of the club, let alone that my great-grandfather was its first president. I did not even know him myself, but I have to take this moment to add an important personal note, one that is at least important to me. If it were not for the Kiwanis Club, I would not be here today. Seriously. While Barrett was president, a speaker at one of the meetings, was class president of an Augusta girls' high school, Tubman High School. She must have made an impression on the members of the club and certainly did on him. Reportedly, he asked family members that evening, did anyone know Cecilia Baker? His maiden aunt said that, well, she is the daughter of so-and-so, and recited further genealogical details. But he was interested. One thing led to another, and after her college schooling for a short time, George and Tito Barrett were married. And so currently 3 of their grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren are members of our club. The history of the Augusta Club is a diary of important issues and items of interest of the days and years as they've gone by these 100 years. Until recently, most meetings were covered and reported on by local newspaper reporters and sometimes by TV news crews. Maybe they were attracted by the free lunch we offered them, but here are a few selected highlights. The year after the founding, the club passed a resolution opposing daylight saving time. Incidentally, this issue is currently being debated in the Georgia legislature 2021. Also that same year, the dean of the University of Richmond addressed the club, saying that the greatest problem for the United States was the race problem, and that the South's solution to it would be their greatest contribution to the world. Well, that was 100 years ago, and it seems that we Southerners still need to complete that contribution somehow or another. In 1933, Kiwanis historical annals entirely missed the establishment of the Augusta National Golf Club that year and the Masters Golf Tournament the next year. The local paper headlines did point out that prohibition law is repealed. Well, did that action help improve our social events? We did have good parties. As the newspaper reported, quote, the Kiwanis Club is noted for its beautiful entertainment on the club's annual ladies' night parties, one of the most brilliant affairs in the history of the club, and one that will be outstanding among the delightful parties of the season. The club continues this tradition. We still do have pretty good parties. In 1934, the club passed a resolution against the wrong usage of the phrase "you all," or its abbreviation "y'all." They explained that the expression is spoken of in the plural, not the singular. And I guess a lot of folks still don't get it right today. Maybe the phrase "you guys" from homogenized TV speak is now taken hold instead. In 1949, we started key clubs at the Academy of Richmond County and Boys Catholic High School. 1953 saw the club establishing the Kiwanis Club Scholarship Fund, and that remains a major funding project and focus of the club in 2021. 1977, news report. The U.S. Supreme Court is scheduled to hear a challenge to the National Kiwanis Club's policy of excluding women from membership. Well, I don't know what their verdict was, but wouldn't our first president, George Barrett, be surprised to know that his granddaughter and federal bankruptcy judge, Susan Barrett, would not only become a member of the Augusta Kiwanis Club, but also serve a term as its president in 2006. In 1978, the club began sponsoring the Richmond County Star Student Program, those that had the highest academic achievement on the standardized tests. Highlights of the Academy Award style presentations have included our own MC, John Bell's recurring story about how the state of Georgia academic achievement program stemmed from the worries about America's brain drain, sparked by the Russians' launch of the space satellite Sputnik. The STAR students are new each year, but for Kiwanians, the Sputnik story remains the same. The Kiwanis Club of Augusta continues to provide annual support for a variety of local charities through its charitable trust and scholarship fund. Its weekly meetings include the Speakers Forum on current issues and an opportunity for fellowship among the members, even by Zoom these days. The Augusta Club continues to make history and remains one of the largest civic clubs in all of Kiwanis International. We're now just beginning to have optional meetings in person and look forward to the time when we can return to our tradition of enjoying personal camaraderie once again. That's up to date.
Thank you, Tom. That was wonderful. I think maybe we might want to look back into encouraging the passing of the daylight, removing of daylight savings time. Might be time to get activated again. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn the program over to our president-elect, Troy Lanier, who will introduce our speakers. Troy?
All right, now we've successfully unmuted there. I'm just so gratified to know that our club has been involved in such important things as working out this y'all situation that we've been struggling with for many years. And so I'm glad to know about that. That was something I was not aware of. All right, our first speaker is Ward Clayton. Ward is a communications professional, author, and editor with over 20 years experience in media, communications, and public relations. He serves as the communications director for Signature Group, and he is owner of Clayton Communications, and he's involved every year in coverage of the Masters Golf Tournament. He is a producer of the 2019 documentary Loopers, The Caddy's Long Walk, and he's author of the book Men on the Bag, Caddies of the Augusta National. It was written in 2004, and it gave a first ever glimpse at the life and impact of the famed caddies at the world's most famous golf course, home of the Masters Tournament. Ward's formerly a sports writer with the Durham Morning Herald, and he's a former sports editor of the Augusta Chronicle, and he has served as director of editorial services for the PGA Tour. Clayton Ward grew up in Durham, North Carolina. He's a graduate of North Carolina, University of North Carolina, and he currently lives with his family in Jacksonville, Florida. So thank you, Ward, for being with us today.
Thank you, Troy. I appreciate it. For the folks in Indianapolis, you see I'm wearing Carolina blue, and I must say that our Tar Heels were disappointing up there. So I'll leave it at that. We'll go on and talk about golf now instead of basketball for the time being. Thanks for having me on this. And I'm going to share my screen with you real quick here so we can get a PowerPoint presentation to you so we can discuss what we're going to be doing here. Everybody see that okay? Somebody give me a thumbs up if you can see that all right.
It's all good.
Good.
Yep, we can see it.
This is a picture that was taken at last November's Masters, which was without any fans or a minimal amount of fans in attendance. There's the classic pimento cheese sandwich, which in doing some research for this year's Masters in the 1940s sold for $0.25. And at this year's Masters, if you were in attendance, you could get it for $1.50. So the price has gone up, but it's still unbelievably cost effective. And here's a Masters mask, which everybody has to wear, and we have to have a drug test before we go on site. And if you go on eBay now, one of these masks goes for like $250. So there's a little bit of a business there in regard to the mask, if you've got that and so forth. The next slide is not for the Augustans, but for the Indianapolis folks. And I want you to sort of say after me, if you can, if you would, to learn how to speak Augustan. Everybody say tuna. Everybody say mint. And in Augusta, this would be the tuna mint. So that's what the folks in Augusta, that's their accent. So the folks in Indianapolis and Indiana may not be familiar with that, but you'll know from now on what that's all about.
Tuna mint.
The next slide is something that I've been involved with for 10 years is masters.com or Masters Digital. If you go to masters.com today, you can see everything we cover there, and it extends to stories, live scoring, hole by hole scoring, every shot by every player. If you've seen the ESPN within the last week, we did a short film, a 30-minute film on behind the scenes at the Masters tournament, which was groundbreaking because it showed some parts of the club which have not been shown before, including the wine cellar, the champions dinner, things of that nature, which are really very interesting to see, and how the Masters tournament was pulled off last November. I will give you a clue as to this week. There are two things that are occur. They're top secret. I can't really reveal them, but one that you'll have access to this week will involve food. So keep an eye on that website this week regarding food as early as tomorrow morning, Tuesday. And the other will be something about the competition and how you can participate in that. So those are two things to keep close tabs on that website this week that will make you feel like you're at the Masters. And I'll leave it at that because they're secret and haven't been revealed yet. But for this crowd, you may want to pay attention to that. It was, as Troy mentioned earlier, in 2004, I wrote a book on the caddies at Augusta National. I was intrigued with a lot of these guys because they're just their nicknames, but not a lot of people knew who they were behind their nicknames. And that's what I wanted, the story I wanted to tell. That came out in 2004. And as we speak, there's an effort being made to reproduce that book in a new format, which will come out either late in 2021 or in 2022. So I will keep my friend Lowell Dorn informed of that, and everybody else there will get the word on that too. Okay. I was also involved last year, the year before last, with a film called Loopers, The Caddy's Long Walk, which is a story of the caddy profession going all the way from Scotland and Ireland to Augusta, Pebble Beach, anywhere you can think of that's got caddy programs, including the Evans Scholars Program, which I know the folks in Indianapolis are probably very aware of, since a lot of the Midwestern universities are involved with that pretty closely. It was a film that took the Augusta caddy story, and it was right down the middle of the storyline for that film. Bill Murray's the narrator for that film. Had a great success, 75% Rotten Tomatoes review, which is really fun to do. Michael Greller, Jordan Spieth are in there. As I mentioned, Bill Murray's in there. Michael Collins from ESPN, a lot of players, a lot of caddies. And so if you're interested in that film, it's on iTunes or any other streaming services you can go. It's Loopers, The Caddy's Long Walk. Very, very fun to do, and had a lot of Augusta focus on it. Something you're going to see at the Masters, sort of inside baseball a little bit, is every time you see a caddy and a player looking at a yardage book, It's sort of their Bible for the week. This first one that you see on your screen currently is the 1960s, when Arnold Palmer took a scorecard and yellow legal pad and drew some of the yardages out. This is the 12th hole at Augusta National, is shown here. And it was his yardage book. He made it himself and stapled the yellow legal pad pages within the scorecard. When Arnold died in 2016, they were going through his office at Bay Hill and found a copy of this in his files and brought it out in the 2017 Masters. This was on display. Really interesting in how a lot of the caddies never had yardage books at Augusta National, or the players up through the 1960s. They did it by remembering yardages from a bunker or from a tree or from a particular landform, and they knew how to read the greens just from walking the property. But Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus were two of the first in the 60s to devise these yardage books. By 1983, outside caddies were first allowed to work at the Masters. And it was the first year that Augusta National got someone from outside to do their yardage books. And this is a depiction from a gentleman named Gorgeous George Lucas. He did all the yardage books at the time on the PGA Tour. And this is one of the yardage books he did. He drew it by hand and used a yardage gauge and so forth of that nature. And you can see Rays Creek going across there with H2O and the fish in there and so forth. He had some fun with that. Today, this is what the yardage book at Augusta National looks like. Much more detail on the change of elevation, things of that nature. You will probably may not know, but one of the biggest things in use on the PGA Tour these days are something called green reading books, which are really, really detailed books on the breaks of greens. Augusta National does not allow green reading books at Augusta National. So the caddies and players have to rely on their institutional knowledge, their ability to scout out the golf course and so forth like that, to give them an indication of how the golf course plays. As I mentioned, the caddies at Augusta, these are some of the guys who really became famous at Augusta over the years as caddies. And Willie Lee Stokes is the marker at the top left. All three of these gentlemen are buried in downtown Augusta. Willie Lee Stokes caddied for 5 Masters winners, including Ben Hogan in 1951 and 1953. He's called the Godfather. Pappy was born on the grounds at Augusta National in the 1920s. His family worked on the property for the Fruitland Nurseries when it was existent. And when the golf course was being built, Pappy was 12 years old, and he served as, quote, the water boy for the property, where the workers were cutting down trees and the plows with mules and so forth like that were working the property. And that's how he learned how the water went to Rays Creek. Everything flowed to Rays Creek. He learned how the greens broke just by watching the people working the property. Pappy Stokes is called the Godfather of all the Augusta National caddies. He's won more than anybody else there as a caddy. The top right one is Ironman Nathaniel Avery, who caddied for Arnold Palmer. One of the great things, probably the greatest thing we did for this film Loopers, I knew for years and years that Ironman died a broke man in 1985. He did not have a marker on his grave until we did the film, and an anonymous donor gave us some money to design a marker for his grave. Lowell Dorn, who's on here from the Augusta location, helped me find this marker, helped me locate, make sure that Ironman was buried there, and that was a proud moment. You can still go to downtown Augusta and see where Ironman's grave is located. Within the last year, going back to last November, Willie Peterson, who caddied for Jack Nicklaus, and 5 of his 6 Masters wins, was also buried in downtown Augusta without a marker. The Golf Channel did a documentary during last November's Masters, about an 8-minute documentary that detailed the caddies at Augusta National, the old caddies. And as a result of that, Jack Nicklaus donated the money to put a marker on Willie's grave. So all three of these guys are buried in downtown Augusta. And it would be interesting if you ever go to Augusta to track down these markers and just see them. I think it's a big part of the history of Augusta and the Masters that doesn't get appreciation and needs to live on beyond their time. Going beyond the caddies real quick here, and everybody does this in picking who they think is going to win the Masters. And these three guys are probably three of my picks, but I'm going to give you some specific detail on all three of them real quickly if I can here. Number one, Jordan Spieth. Jordan's greatest attribute is in his first three Masters, he finished second, he won, and he finished second. And he probably should have finished second, 1-1, but he had a terrible time on the 12th hole in 2016, and Danny Willett won that Masters. So Jordan's a guy to keep an eye on. He's back in good form playing going into the Masters. Probably the guy I'm going to pick is John Rahm, who's pictured in the middle. The only issue with John is, who's from Spain, that's John pictured with his wife. His wife is due with their first child right now, this week. So I think it's in question whether John's going to play in the Masters or not. John's been on the record in the last few weeks saying that if his wife delivers during Masters week, he's leaving and going home to Arizona. So I think it's a big question there. What John, he's in good form, playing really well, but I think his mind may be elsewhere if he doesn't have his child as of yet. The third one, and probably the most interesting guy in all of golf, is Bryson D Schambaugh, who's pictured on the right. Bryson's, as you all may remember, the Bay Hill tournament in Orlando a couple weeks ago was famous for possibly trying to drive a par 5 green. At Augusta in November, he stated that he was going to try to take a shortcut on the 13th hole at Augusta and hit it in the 14th fairway and get a new angle into that green. Well, just to prove the fact that length, even though Jack Nicklaus and Tiger Woods dominated the Masters with their length, length's not always the biggest factor. The third hole at Augusta National is a 350-yard par 4. John should probably be able to try to drive that green. At the Masters last November, John made a 7 in the second round when he lost his drive to the left of the green in wet ground. He finished the week 3 over par on that hole, whereas a gentleman like Bernhard Langer, who was age 63 last year, 2-time Masters champion, shortest player in the field, laid up every day in the fairway and played the hole 2 under par. So 3 over par, 2 under par, with 2 completely different ways of playing the golf course. It was really, really quite interesting. As always, as was mentioned in the Kiwanis presentation at the outset of their history plays a big factor at the Masters. And I want to talk about something that happened 50 years ago. 50 years ago in the Masters, Charlie Cootie won the tournament. He beat Jack Nicklaus and Johnny Miller to win the tournament. Charlie Cootie was very much of a middle of the pack kind of player on the PGA Tour in those days, but he caught magic in a bottle that week. And a lot of it was due to the fact that he had a great caddy. And I'm not going to show the next slide yet, but I want to tell you the story first before I show you the slide. In 1971, Charlie Cootie's caddy was a guy named Cricket. Cricket was a tall man, long arms, long legs. Walter Pritchett was his given name, but his nickname was Cricket because of his physical features. Well, during the third round of the tournament, they're approaching the turn at the golf tournament, and Charlie Cootie's hitting his second shot on the 8th hole, and he's leading the tournament. They're waiting for the green to clear, and Cricket asked Charlie Cootie, he says, Mr. Cootie, what time does television start this weekend? And Charlie Cootie's all focused on his second shot. He said, Cricket, why are you asking that? I have no idea. He says, well, Mr. Cootie, you know that I drive a bus in Atlanta. That's my regular job. And I told my boss this week that I was going to be visiting my sick grandmother in Houston. And I didn't think you were going to play this well. And Charlie Cootie laughed at that. And they got to the turn every day, actually the 11th hole where television was scheduled to come on. And this is what happened every day on the weekend that led Charlie Cootie to have some humorous side notes to win the tournament. Every day, Walter Pritchett, cricket, would take the towel off the golf bag, put it over his head, then put his hat on and try to hide from his boss on TV. And Charlie Cootie to this day says that when he got in the middle of the back nine, he was as much laughing at his caddy wearing that towel over his head as he was the fact that Jack Nicklaus and Johnny Miller were challenging him to win the tournament. So quite an interesting sidelight to that tournament. So at this point, I'll see if you got questions. Martha, if this is the time you want to do this, let me know. I will tell you this picture here, a lot of people get this confused, even some of the TV folks do. This is the 13th green at Augusta National. And quite often people will say that's Rays Creek. That's not right. That's incorrect. This picture here is a tributary of Rays Creek. Rays Creek runs in front of the 13th tee and in front of the 12th green, behind the 11th green, but a tributary runs left of 13 and in front of the 13th green. So that's my little trivia for the moment here. So any questions, feel free to chime in. I'll be glad to try to answer them.
Okay, Ward, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna go ahead and let Lowell do the presentation, and we'll just open questions for both of you afterwards, if that's all right.
That's perfect. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, Lowell, you're up. Or I guess, Troy, you need to introduce Lowell. Sorry.
All right, I don't want to share yet. Troy? Troy, you unmute.
Troy, you're muted. There you go.
Okay, had a brief technical problem there. Sorry about that. All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, that was great. Learned a lot about the yardage books. The history of the caddies was great, and that Charlie Cootie story is hilarious. So that was very good. Our next speaker is Laurel Dorn. Lowell is an Augusta native. He's been employed for many years by Mars Communications. He's a past president of our club. He currently serves as secretary treasurer. Lowell has attended the Masters tournament for over 50 years. In 1988, he became a volunteer at the tournament, working in computer support. And in 1994, he was invited to become an official on the grounds committee, where he continues to serve today. And Lowell's going to talk to us about the origins of the Augusta National Golf Club and the Masters tournament.
Thank you, Troy. I want to add my welcome to all of the greetings to all of our fellow Kiwanis, especially you up there in Indianapolis. Also want to say that my family actually has some Hoosier blood in them, and along with Derek May, who's on this phone call, he's our vice president. We have some kinfolk that live up in French Lick. Fortunately, they've all been arrested and sent back to Georgia, so you don't have to worry about them now. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the founding of the Augusta National Golf Club and the Masters Tournament. This is going to be very brief, and I'm going to share my screen with you here. I go where?
You go to your platform. See it. Hit share.
Share
Slide share.
up here. Okay, everybody see that? Okay. What I hit next? Folks, it all starts right here. Robert Tyre Jones Jr., born in 1902 on St. Patrick's Day in Atlanta, Georgia, to Clara and Colonel Robert Jones Sr. Robert, or as they called him, was Bobby. was born a very frail child. He was very sickly. Matter of fact, he couldn't eat solid food until he was 5 years old. And they were worried about his health, so the doctor prescribed to take up the game of golf. You know, the walking would be good and the fresh air and all that sort of thing. So they took young Bobby over to the East Lake Country Club, and they introduced him to the club pro there. His name was Stuart Maiden. And Stuart started teaching him the game of golf. And it was obvious from the start that Bobby had a terrific gift for the game. He was exceptional in everything except one area. That was his temper. When he'd miss a shot, he would throw clubs, swear, and pitch a fit. That is until one day, Colonel Jones took him behind the woodshed and explained things to him. Bobby attended Georgia Tech University, Emory University, and Harvard, where he learned a law degree. He was also a captain in the U.S. Army and was at the Normandy landing in France. Now, Bobby played the game of golf for pure love of the game. He was an amateur. He never turned professional and retired as an amateur in 1930 at the age of 28. During that short career, he compiled quite an amazing record. From 1923 until 1930, that's 7 years, Bobby won 12 major championships and won the Grand Slam in 1930, winning all 4 major tournaments in that 1 year. No one has come close to matching that record since. Why he's not mentioned as one of the greatest golfers of all time is beyond me. And he did all this as an amateur, and he only played 3 months out of the year. After retirement, Bobby wanted to build the golf course of his dreams. There was no suitable land available in the Atlanta area. And during his search for a suitable site, he was introduced to Clifford Roberts. That's Clifford on the right. This picture was taken about 1931. Clifford was a Wall Street investment banker, and they met in the Vanderbilt Hotel in New York City. And after a 10-minute conversation, they decided to become partners in the new golf course. Thomas Barrett, an Augusta lawyer, heard about this venture, and he contacted Jones in Atlanta. He invited him and Roberts to come and visit the 365-acre parcel of land in Augusta named Fruitland Nurseries. When Bobby stepped out on the back porch of the house and surveyed the land, he exclaimed, and I quote, "Perfect. And to think this ground has been laying here all these years, waiting for someone to come along and lay a golf course upon it." They bought the land for $70,000. And remember, this is a time when we were only 1 year into the Great Depression. Construction on the course began in 1931. Now that's Bobby Jones on the left hitting golf balls, and that's Alistair McKenzie to the right. And what they're doing here, if you can look out here and see that light spot just off in the distance, they're trying to locate a bunker out there in the fairway, and he's hitting balls to the proper place. Does anybody other than Ward know what hole this is? It's number 8 at Augusta National, par 5 uphill. And that's Bobby laying it out right there. This is Bobby, a picture of Bobby on the right and Dr. Alistair McKenzie, the Scotsman, on the left. This is a picture of the original plantation house in Fruitland Nurseries. It was built back in the early 1800s. And the interesting thing about this building is the walls are poured concrete. It's not stick built, and it's built like a bomb shelter. And they converted that from that to the main clubhouse that you see now. The very first Masters tour, or it wasn't first Masters, the first tournament was held in 1934, was named the Augusta Invitational. Some of the members, including the famed golf writer Grantland Rice, wanted to call it the Masters, but Jones felt like that was too pretentious. Bobby finally relented in 1938, and they changed the name to the Masters in 1938. In the ensuing years, Jones came down with syringomyelia, a crippling and degenerative spinal cord disease, and he died in Atlanta in 1971. Clifford Roberts was diagnosed with cancer in 1977 and took his life at the age of 83 on the Augusta National grounds. And that concludes my presentation. Madam President?
Yes, thank you, Lowell. Now we'll open up the floor to questions. So we're pretty informal here. And if you want to ask a question, just unmute your microphone. Or if you don't want to talk and you want me to ask the question, you can certainly type it in the chat. So who has our first question? Of either Lowell or Ward or both?
I'll go ahead. This is Greg from Indianapolis. It's interesting that the Masters is a private tournament versus part of the PGA Tour. I'm assuming that Augusta National has a great relationship with the PGA, and that you think that that's going to continue. Is there anything, unique about that relationship that you can tell us?
Okay, Ward, do you want to field that one?
Sure. Yeah, it's not a PGA Tour affiliated event, but neither are the US Open, the Open Championship, or the PGA Championship. None of them are PGA Tour events, so to speak. They just fall on the calendar as the four major championships. I think that their historic value goes way beyond the formation of the PGA Tour. So therefore, they're institutions within that, and so they're going to be cherished on the schedule. As you'll notice, the PGA Tour's event, the Players Championship, that's their biggest event. They've tried to position that in the middle of that so you can have a big event every month. The Players Championship was held in March, which Justin Thomas won, and they moved the PGA Championship from August up to May within the last couple of years to try to have a humongous event every month. So I think the PGA Tour is sort of cherishes those relationships, and it's, those events are all historically oriented, and the PGA Tour really wants to keep them in the middle of that.
So we have a question from the chat, and they want to know for you and for Lowell, what is your favorite Masters, like what year that you've attended over the years? For example, 1986 with Jack, or what stands out to you as your favorite?
I'll go first on that one. Oddly enough, my favorite Masters didn't involve Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, Tiger Woods, or anybody else. It involved a little man from Fort Worth, Texas, and the Scots referred to him as the wee Iceman. Does anybody know who that is other than Ward? Ben Hogan. And I'll tell you why it's my favorite memory. As you all know, Ben Hogan was seriously injured in an automobile wreck in 1949 when he was hit by a bus in the car with his wife, and he dove across his wife to protect her, and he was really busted up bad. He had all kinds of surgeries and blood clots and all that sort of thing. They said he'd never play golf again. Well, 2 years later, he won the US Open. And you thought, well, this man he's never going to play golf like he did before. But I remember my favorite memory is a Saturday of 1967. It was the third round. And Ben Hogan at the time was 54 years old. He went out on the front nine, he shot 36, and he was kind of in the mix. He was in contention. But when he turned to the back nine, he birdied 10, 11, 12, eagle 15, and birdied 17 to shoot 30 on the backside and shoot a 66 at age 54. And when he got to the 18th fairway, it's a very steep uphill walk. He was taking little bitty baby steps. He could barely walk up the hill. And I can tell you there wasn't a dry eye in the gallery on the 18th hole, including myself. It was the most moving moment I've ever seen. And I've seen Nicklaus's wins and all the Tigers and all, but that was my greatest Masters.
Okay.
Mine's 1975. Jack Nicklaus beat Tom Weiskopf and Johnny Miller down the stretch to win there. But the reason is I saw it on television, and it's really the first time I saw the Masters on television. And it's probably the moment that brought CBS television to the masses. because you had the Englishman Ben Wright, who was calling the 15th hole, and the Englishman Henry Longhurst, who was calling the 16th hole. And what happened is Weiskopf made a birdie putt on the 15th hole, and Ben Wright said evil music to Mr. Nicklaus's ears. And Nicklaus had about a 40-foot putt on the 16th hole for birdie. And Nicklaus proceeded to make that putt up the hill, and Henry Longhurst responded something of the nature of, "Now, Mr. Weiskopf, you must take it as you dished it out." So it was just like television drama right there with a golf tournament. And I think a lot of people were captivated by the fact the Masters was coming into their living rooms. You know, they were captivated at first in the early 60s with Palmer on TV, but that was black and white, and this was full color. And you had these great commentators on there. So it was, that's the year I remember the most.
Okay, great. Who else has a question?
Nobody wants to know how to get tickets?
Lowell, to expand on your talk about Ben Hogan. Ben Hogan was having severe pulmonary emboli, and they said he was going to die. And Alton Ochsner Sr., who was chairman of the Department of Surgery at Tulane at that time, had just come up with the idea of what we call plicating the vena cava, or shutting it off, suturing it closed. And he did that, stopped the pulmonary emboli, and of course, Hogan was able to live as a result. However, you have to walk the course, as you know, and he got truncal edema. The blood flow from his legs would not go through collaterals well enough to allow him to walk. And that's why he had to quit the tournament, and that's why he walked so slowly up the 18th green.
Nice to hear from a doctor.
Yes, thank you. So Lowell, in the
I
chat,
wouldn't have said all that, but you know.
Well, I had the good fortune of spending the last 6 weeks of my senior year with Dr. Alton Ochsner Sr. And one Wednesday, every year Ben Hogan would come for a physical, and he invited me to go to dinner with he and Ben Hogan, which was an unbelievable situation. Ben Hogan told me that story.
Talking about Ben Hogan, I remember as a teenager, he was my favorite golfer, he and Sam Snead. I would go out to the practice range and I'd sit there and watch him hit balls. And I can tell you that if you blindfolded me, you put 20 golfers out there, I could pick him out, because when he struck a ball, it was so pure. It had a buzz, a sound to it that no one else made. And his caddy would be out there 150 yards away with a bag, a shag bag, and he wouldn't take more than a step either way to catch the ball in flight. His talent was immense. It was just incredible how well he could hit a golf ball. If he could have putted and hadn't been in that wreck, he'd have set records. They'd still be chasing.
No question.
I think Rex should add that he was personally acquainted and attended Bobby Jones in his late years.
Well,
No.
Not only that, he was Ty Cobb's secretary.
No, I spent from the 14th of May till the 17th of July in '61, which was the day he died, in a small room in Emory with him 24/7.
Wow.
71.
Pardon me?
71.
No,
Bobby-
he died in 60. I'm talking about Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb
Oh,
died.
I'm sorry.
Well, Lowell, Greg from Indianapolis does want to know if you have some insight on how to get tickets to the tournament besides the lottery.
Yeah, well, my best suggestion was to befriend a member of the Augusta National. There's a quote secondary market. Matter of fact, StubHub even has the audacity to have an office not 1,500 yards away from the Masters, and I've had people come up on the course and ask me where the StubHub outlet is. Of course, that's not something they approve of that much, but there is a secondary market out there, but it costs dearly to get tickets that way. I remember years ago, I scoffed at my mother when she signed up for the ticket. They started the lottery, what, Lord, was that about 75 or so?
Probably,
And,
it's probably 72, 71 or 72. I
Yeah,
think.
early 70s. And she said, have you signed up to get tickets? And I said, Mom, are you kidding? I said, anybody get a ticket at Masters, they're giving them away. She said, well, one day they're going to be hard to get. And I just laughed. And yeah.
Listen to your mother, Lowell.
Yeah. You don't know how many times I've heard that.
Who else has a question for either Ward or Lowell?
So I have a question for Ward pertaining to the caddies. Today, everybody kind of brings their own caddies. Is that right? Do we have any players that still utilize caddies that are from the Augusta National?
Jeff, very rarely. You'll have maybe some amateurs who will, or maybe a guy who's an older player who will do that. But usually they bring their own caddy. And a lot of times, 2 examples this year, Stuart Sink has got his son caddying for him. Lee Westwood is going to have his son caddying for him. So a lot of times they use the opportunity to bring a family friend or somebody of that nature to caddy for them. The Augusta National Women's Amateur, which takes place the week before, it's a requirement that they have an Augusta National caddy when they have a practice round there on Friday, and most of them opt to use an Augusta National caddy on that one round on Saturday. Last year, the young lady who won the tournament had her father caddying for her off-site, and then she went to Augusta National and she got an Augusta National caddy because she thought it would be valuable. Middle of the round, she got a headache and was almost blinded by it. He guided her through those 2 holes until she felt better. And that was a big key for her winning the tournament. And you probably remember the fact that was quite dramatic, her winning the tournament, that first one in 2019. So not many Augusta National caddies work in the tournament anymore, unfortunately.
Thanks, Ward.
Yep.
Anyone else? We probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
You all had touched on Deschambaugh for a second, like how he was talking about teeing off on 13 into the 14th fairway to have a different look into 13. His game is just fascinating from the analytical perspective. Have you guys seen him do anything differently from your perspective the past few years?
Last November, when there were very few people on site, I walked up to the 15th tee. And coming off the 14th green were John Rahm, and I don't remember the 3rd member of the group, and Bryson D Schambaugh, and they stood on the 15th tee. And I've never seen anything like this before. It reminded me of the guy who throws a shot put at the track and field meet. His caddy told him he needed to clean his cleats before he teed off. So he went to the side of the tee box with a divot tool and cleaned his cleats. He teed the ball up, stood behind the ball, and started these deep breaths. And I've never seen anybody do this before. And then he started swinging at it like he was, like he was trying to hit the ball in his practice swings. And then he got up to address the ball and started this deep breathing and almost this grunting. And the thing that amazed me, there was nobody around watching, but I could imagine if the gallery was 4 or 5 deep, that people would probably be just fascinated by this. So I think he's the most fascinating guy in golf right now, just the tactics he's taken to play golf. And I think Rory mentioned a couple weeks ago about how it influenced him negatively, but also the fact about how good his short game is. People have completely forgotten about that. When he hits the ball in the rough, he's so strong, he hits the ball out of the rough and the rough doesn't have any effect on him. So I think, there's no rough at Augusta National, and he didn't play really well last November. I don't know what the situation was, but I'm interested to see him back there again in April and see if there's any kind of way he's going to attack the golf course that's going to be different. I think that's always the question. Anytime he goes somewhere, is he going to play one hole particularly different or anything of that nature?
Martha.
Yes, sir.
I have not a question, but perhaps our guest might want to know what a good community citizen the Augusta National is in Augusta.
Okay, Lowell, do you want to cover that?
Well, yeah, and with Ward's help too, the Augusta National is very generous to this neighborhood in so many ways, a lot of ways you don't even know. But last year, to give you an example, they donated $10 million to local charities within the Augusta area. And to add on to that, they're a big investor in a new building project that's going to take place in the middle of downtown Augusta called the Hub. And we're talking about, an $18 million project, and they're one of the major investors in there. And they also, they support the First Tee. They're just a fantastic neighbor and do so much for our community, and not only ours, but for others too. And you might want to add on to that, Ward.
Yeah, I think that's always been the case, Lowell, but it's they haven't publicized the fact they've done that a whole lot. But I think that changed a lot last November when they announced publicly the project you're talking about. But they also announced publicly that Lee Elder is going to be an honorary starter, the first Black man to play in the Masters in 1975. But he's going to be an honorary starter. But they started a scholarship in his honor for the men's golf team at Payne College, which is a historically Black college in downtown Augusta. But they also did a women's scholarship. And what's unique about that is Payne College does not have a women's team. So they're starting a women's team there. And even beyond that, during the pandemic, when they had all the pimento cheese and all the egg salad and all this stuff and potato chips left over from last April's Masters, they donated that to, I guess, the Golden Harvest Food Bank. Is that right, Lowell?
That's right.
And so schools, and especially the schools in inner city Augusta, got a lot of this food for their kids to eat who were on lunch support. So that was, there's been a lot of public facing efforts there by Augusta National to show some of their community support through efforts like this. And I think that'll continue in the foreseeable future.
Lowell, didn't they just give $1 million here a couple of months ago to set up a COVID vaccination site?
Yes, they did. The old Steinmark property they owned where the store used to be, they did that, Dalton, and they did quite a nice job with it. Another benefit that we didn't talk about, Ward, at least to this community, is the Augusta National has been on a construction schedule for the last 6, 7, 8 years, and not something like I've never seen. Building tremendous buildings, administration buildings. CBS is getting a new building this year, just a new golf shop, and all these construction crews and people that work in this community have benefited so much from their construction projects.
Well, what's doubly interesting about that, Lowell, and anybody out there who's in engineering will relish this, is that Washington Road is a main thoroughfare through Augusta for the folks in Indianapolis. And in order to build this broadcast center across Washington Road, they tunneled under Washington Road, mainly so they wouldn't interrupt traffic. So there's a 2-lane tunnel under Washington Road now that did not require, I guess, minimal disruption of the traffic on Washington Road while this was being dug for the past 2 years.
Yeah.
There's also a tunnel under Berkman's Road for a walkway.
Yep.
Actually, it's 2.
2?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And Lowell, you said that all this construction's been going on, but a lot of that was to create free parking for the patrons.
That's exactly right, Rex, because they wanted to free up that lot that's west of the golf course. They can currently park 7,000 cars, but they ultimately want us to park 10,000. And that was all done, as you said, to open up all of that area for free parking.
For the folks in Indianapolis, and this would draw a parallel when the Indianapolis 500 goes on there. Can you imagine the parking lots that are adjacent to the speedway allowing everybody that comes to the race to park at no charge? That's the way it is in Augusta for the Masters. They set this aside so you could pull in there and park. It used to be you'd park in the local church or businesses or whatever. You'd pay you pay the local folks a fee, but now they got this huge parking area beside there that doesn't cost you anything.
And people would rent out their yards, and have people park there and make some easy money that way with people parking in their yards and stuff when they live around the tournament. And now this has changed all that for the better because it's all in one place.
And it's all free.
Yeah. Yep. One thing I want to share that that I hear so much, and Ward does too, from people who come to Augusta first time and go to the Masters. They can't believe the difference between them when they leave Washington Road and enter the grounds. Washington Road is a concrete jungle, tons of drive-in restaurants, and you name it. I mean, it is absolute horrible. And you go from that to Valhalla. I mean, when you go on the grounds of the Augusta National, the beauty is just overwhelming. The flowers, the grass, just everything about it. You go, it's so 180. That really stuns a lot of people when they step inside those gates.
I got to jump off for another meeting, but I couldn't agree more. I've only been there once. I think it was 2013, and it was amazing. I can tell you one of the things that amazed me the most is the fact that they reseed the entire grounds every year, from my understanding, with ryegrass to make it all green. And the distance between the sand and the grass on every trap is exactly the same. It is the most manicured thing I've ever seen in my life.
Well, it's even beyond that, Greg. Every Labor Day about then, they scarify the ground, which they take the grass that's there, this Bermuda grass, they take it right down to the root surface, and it looks brown for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then they just pour the rye seed to it, and all of a sudden there's grass everywhere. They could grow grass on a doorknob. It's amazing.
Well, remember when number 11 got washed out when we had the flood of Rays Creek?
Yeah.
They put it back where no pro could tell the difference in the way the surface was redone. It was exactly the same. The everything that every they had, they've kept a record of everything they've done and how they did it and so on and so forth since the beginning. And all they did was go back to that initial plan, and the undulations and everything are exactly the same.
I'll share a tidbit with you. The 12th green sits in a corner of the course. It doesn't get much morning sunshine. The grass doesn't grow well. They put pipes under the green.
Yes.
To run cold water through in the summer to keep the roots cool. And then they bring out growing lights every single day. They roll them out onto the green at night. And so they're constantly in light 24 hours a day.
Okay, thank you all. I want to particularly thank our speakers today. Ward, thank you for joining us. I know you're going to be here in our neck of the woods soon, but we want to thank you for dialing in. Lowell, we want to thank you for everything you've shared. Tom, for the history. Thanks to the members from Indianapolis. For our members, want to remind you that we are still on a bi-weekly meeting schedule, but 2 weeks from now is the Monday of the Masters, so we will not be meeting then. So instead, we'll meet the 12th, and we will be doing our hybrid format. So we'll continue on Zoom, but we'll also have an in-person option. We will be at the North Augusta Community Center. You'll be getting lots of emails from me about reserving your meal if you plan on attending that. For those who do attend in person on the 12th, General Perry Smith will be there with his new memoir, Listen Up, and he will give you a free copy. I've been reading it. It's really good, and I hope you'll join us then to get your copy of that. I am going to end with a joke. Those Augusta members know I alternate back and forth because I'm not super confident in my joke-making skills, but I found a good one that's golf-related, which is very hard to find clean golf jokes, just so you guys know. So this one is definitely applicable to what we talked about today. Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, and Tiger Woods were standing at the throne of heaven. God looks at them and says, before granting you a place at my side, I must ask you what you have learned and what you believe in. God asks Arnold first, what do you believe? Arnie thinks long and hard, looks God in the eye and says, I believe in hard work, in staying true to family and friends. I believe in giving. I was lucky, but I always tried to do right by my fans. God couldn't help but see the essential goodness of Palmer and offers him a seat at his left. Then God turns to Nicklaus and says, what do you believe? Jack says, I believe passion, discipline, courage, and honor are the fundamentals of life. Like Arnold, I believe in hard work. I too have been lucky, but win or lose, I've always tried to be a true sportsman, both on and off the playing fields. God is greatly moved by Jack's high-pitched eloquence, and he offers him a seat at the right. Finally, God turns to Tiger Woods and says, "Tiger, what do you believe?" Tiger responds, "I believe you're in my seat." And on that note, we will end our first ever inter-club meeting. Thank you for everyone for attending. And again, thank you, Ward, Lowell, and Tom, for your presentations. Everyone have a great week. Be safe. Get your COVID vaccines.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay.
And you're also invited. We're going to have an interclub with Tokyo, the Tokyo Club. That's the good news. The bad news is it starts at 11 o'clock at night.
Well, you can send us that information. I'll be sure to
will.
share it, and the one at the end of April too with you.
Will do. You
Okay,
take care.
great.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.